Why would someone not want healing in their life? This is what we see going on here today in John chapter 5, where Jesus is meeting this invalid with a bunch of other invalids, people that have had problems their whole life, and he's going to heal him. But before he heals him, he asks him, do you want to get better? It seems like kind of a dumb question, but I think there's a reason for this, and Randy and I are here to talk about this account of Jesus in Jerusalem at a pool called Bethesda. Places that they call hospitals, or Bethesda Hospital.
Well, the famous national hospital in Washington, D.C. is called Bethesda.
Oh, it is. That's right. I guess
for the obvious reason.
Right. Well, this is where this healing took place, and you haven't been to Jerusalem, I think, have you?
No, I've not.
No, I've been there, and there's a big church there. I think that the church is in honor of Mary or Elizabeth. Some of the best acoustics in the world in this church. I went in and sang a solo in there. But outside, I think there's this pool is still there. And this is where people had come because they believed you go into these waters and you can get healing. They got places like this in the world today, do they not?
Well, there's health spas all over the world.
Well, yeah. Well, they call them health spas, but I mean, it's like, hey, forget about the chemotherapy. Just go to the spa and you'll be healed, That I don't think that there are places like that. In Catholicism, they have these places where they believe their miracles can happen if you touch this or get close to this icon or something where people will believe in these miracle healings. Have you ever went to a healing service, Randy?
No, but I've told you that in a previous church, when we had communion, we had elders on either side of the church. As we left, if we had something we wanted to pray about, we went and talked to the elders. They put hands on those asking for prayers, and they prayed over them. And there's at least one case I'm aware of where the woman claimed she was healed, and weeks and even months later she was claiming she was healed, the pain was gone. So they happen.
Right, and charismatics will get into these oftentimes, and that, God can do what he wants. He has power to do what he wants. In the story here, it says that they're going to this place, Bethesda, but they're not seeing Jesus is the hope. I don't even think they know Jesus is there. He's coming up behind it. Now they're in Jerusalem by the Sheep Gate pool in Aramaic called Bethesda. I guess it's an Aramaic word. So an Aramaic word. That's the language Jesus spoke, which has 5 roof colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. So what was going on here is that they go to this pool and the water gets stirred. Now there are some extra biblical sources that say angels would come along and stir this water. But however, it gets stirred, and once it gets stirred, the people flock into there. The blind or whoever can get in the water with the belief that they're going to get healed. So all of these people are backed up to this pool because that's where they have hope. I think in our country, if you had serious health problems, where would the hope be? Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, Stanford. I don't know what are the top places.
Johns Hopkins. I mean, there's
Johns
lots
Hopkins.
of names. Lots of names of places that are known for healing. I mean, you see the ads on television for St. Jude's, and they're asking for money donations, but they have a cancer clinic for children.
Right, but there's always these top of the tops,
That's right.
But of course, to get into those, you've got to have a referral to get into them. But I think it's common for all humans. We move towards hope.
Yes.
What is going to make our life work? What is going to bring us healing? What is going to bring us a better life? When Powerball numbers come up and they start to advertise $1 billion, they'll show the line going around the building because people have the hope. If I could just get a hold of the cash, life will be good.
All my problems will be solved with cash.
Well, and there will be a lot of problems solved. Somebody who's struggling and they can't get their car fixed, they say that it takes advantage of the poor. But I think the statement was made before I've heard this, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, Randy. that all human action is driven by hope?
No, I won't agree with that.
Good,
All-
because you
all-
just disagreed with Martin Luther, and I like that. I
All,
set you up.
all human action is driven by hope. I don't think outpourings of love necessarily driven by hope. They're driven, hope, I mean, unless you got a definition of hope. It's not hope for me. I care about someone, and I might do something totally altruistic for them because I care about them. I love them.
Not to get reciprocity, or
That's
get
right.
something back. And but even there, the hope is I want to give something. You just brought up St. Jude's. Was that Danny Thomas and his daughter, Marla, that they're asking for money, and they hope people will give to the hospital so they can cure people. The people who give the money have a hope that if I give this money, it's going to help these people who are hurting. So I think hope can be for self or for other. I mean, we're doing this recording for hope. We hope that, we call it Conversations for the Curious, that curious people will say, well, what did Jesus do? And that's our hope. That hope keeps us going. I got a book in my library. I never really read it, but the guy was depressed. He had depression in his life, and he struggled with it, and he gave me a book called Hopelessness. That when people come hopeless, they just say, the heck with it, I'm checking out. We're in California here, people will jump off the bridge, I think.
Well, okay, in that regard, maybe that's what keeps us going, is hope for something, maybe it's something better, hope for opportunity, hope for something, maybe you're right, maybe hope drives a
lot of what we do. Randy is a gardener, I think he's a better gardener than I am. Okay, I admit it. But when we plant, we hope for something.
I go further than hope, I expect. You once picked up something I grew that was sitting at the altar at harvest time, here below us, and you said, how do you grow them so big? And I said, I don't do anything. I just put the seed in the ground and water it. God does the rest.
Right, and people move towards God for hope. The story here, the hope is in this water. I guess word got out. I mean, I just got this book recently. The guy's saying, well, even atheists can get healed if they have hope in the right things, and that they move towards this and that you believe it. It's, kind of like a mind over matter thing. And here, I don't know how many people there were connected to this idea of that God would be in that water, or was it just the water? Kind of sounds like an old beer commercial. It's the water. But that they believe that it's there. I mean, economics, if you look at where populations have gathered throughout the U.S. and throughout the world, and people even come into the U.S., they're all driven by hope. People will move a hope. When your company moved you to North Carolina, it moved you because of hope. Somehow North Carolina was going to come through better than the Silicon Valley.
No, the calculation was it made an economic difference in the vitality of the company.
And that's the hope.
Yes.
That a lot of the hope is financial driven. Here you have one of the greatest needs that we have as human being, and that is the hope of healing with our health. Once you lose your health, that nothing else matters.
I think an interesting sideline on this man that we're talking about, that Jesus talked to and asked him if he wanted to get well, he had been ill.
Get to that.
Ill for 38 years.
Yeah.
38 years. I mean, he knew nothing else but this mere existence he had of life. But he did have hope, and he didn't know what it was. He couldn't possibly have known what freedom of movement and physical health was, because he'd never had it, apparently. But he had hope that this would happen to him and that he would have a better life.
Right.
That's why he was there.
That's why he was there. And again, he got up that morning believing I'm going to go. I don't know how the whole thing worked.
I don't think he got up that morning.
They just said, well, on this day, go to the pool of Bethesda, people are going to be healed on that, and they start packing them in. I asked you earlier if you've ever been to a healing service. You said, no, I've been to one. When I first became Christian, one of my neighbors was into the charismatic. I was into another church, well, Lutheran church. And I says, yeah, I'll go down there. We went to, I think, Modesto. And had people stacked up on stretchers on both sides. Some people will argue these things are a scam and they're rigged. And, I don't know what the deal is with all of them. I don't want to judge. God can do what he wants. But hope will move people towards a better future. The question that I would ask is, can sometimes our need for security be more important than our hope of a better life? And was that why Jesus asked this question? Do you want to get better? But, going along to the story, I think, again, we're not in chapter 10. What's wrong with me? We're in chapter 5. That if, the chronological parts of the gospel readings, sometimes they can be mixed around. But I would imagine this is early in the ministry of Jesus. Because as you see in the gospel readings going down, they know this guy's going to make things happen. And they're not going towards water. They're moving towards him.
That's right.
And then in the story right here, he's just coming along. I don't think people knew maybe who he was. They didn't go, oh, Jesus just arrived, the big celebrity who's going out and doing all these things.
Well, maybe the general population didn't know that yet, but he had already made himself known because the Pharisees were there. They saw this happen, and so they at least were aware of this man who was out doing, if you will, miraculous things. He was doing them, and they were disturbed by it. And then the following verses talk about that. That isn't why we're here. The knowledge of Jesus Christ was there. It probably wasn't common knowledge.
Right.
And he wasn't necessarily recognizable.
That was a good point, Randy, that the Pharisees did know who he was because, and my bias is, well, it's not a bias. You see it in the Gospels. He's being watched. Once he becomes a threat to the religious leadership, he's being watched, and he's being watched for a slip-up. And that's what people are getting here. They're getting the slip up. But again, you make the good point. It ends on, and it was the Sabbath. And then you go on to the rest of the verses, and then it starts talking about these guys who show up. But he talks about this one man that was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, he knew he had already been there a long time. He said to him, do you want to be healed? There's the question. Verse 6. Well, duh.
Well, but
the
hold
sick
it.
man, well, okay, I'll hold it before I go to 7.
We ought to ask ourselves that question. Do we want to be healed?
Well, I think that's where we should get at with this text. I think that, do we want a better life?
Is that
And I think the easy answer is, yeah, we do. Well, and sometimes to get to the better life, there's resistance because this is what I think's going on, all right? I'll spill the beans. Oftentimes, we will choose the familiar and the known, or as Randy said earlier, the comfort zone.
Yes.
Over a better life. So the guy Jesus is asking this guy in verse 6 that, do you want this? Which he really doesn't answer. He doesn't say, yeah, of course I want it, or yes, I do want it. He says, in verse 7, it says, the sick man answered him, sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am going another steps down before me. So he's trying to get in there, and someone cuts him off. He sees, oh yeah, the solution is I got to get in that water. And if I can't get in that water, I can't get the healing. And so he answers the question that way. I can't get in the water. Jesus is saying, well, do you want this? And he's saying, yeah, I'm trying to do this, and if I could do it. But I think what gets at this guy is a couple things. One, 38 years, however John figured that one out, or they asked somebody. And the other thing is Jesus saw him, and he was there for a long time. I think you mentioned before, you thought, well, was it 68 years or 38 years he's sitting there? I don't think so. But he's there for a long time, and Jesus knows it. He wants something and he's not happening. And so Jesus goes up to him and asks him this question. Now, we got to be fair. We let other people, we got other voices here. One, Kretzmann, he doesn't talk about it, but other commentaries say, oh, he's just saying, well, how are you today? Or he's just greeting him. He doesn't really mean that question. And I'm saying, I don't know.
Oh, I don't think Jesus did things without some intent.
It wasn't like, hey, how are you doing? Or good to see you, or some
Wasn't the
frivolous
casual-
way to connect with it.
It wasn't a casual greeting. I think it was a serious question. And that's why I say, do we want to be healed? But look, there are things that happen when you want to be healed. Consequences, I don't like that word in this context, but there are things that happen and new things happen. And like I said, this guy was going to experience things that he may never have experienced in his life. Certainly couldn't remember 38 years as an invalid. He can't walk. He's lying on a bed for 38 years.
Right, and I'm saying that, I see persistence here, hope and persistence.
Persistence, good comment, good word.
You know, he's not saying, hey, forget it, I can't get in the water. I wanted my cousin, he said he would be down here to help me get in the water so people wouldn't cut ahead of me. He didn't show up. Okay, he's not here, I might as well forget it. Let's just go home now. It's over, you know, and has no hope. No, he's staying and he keeps trying. But even the idea of 38 years, he had the hope that something could happen in that water. And, you know, what makes people give up hope? When do they not? You know, I was mentioning President Roosevelt, who had polio. They said, and then he had these other problems with his heart, which he ready to kill him at any time. But they said all the way to the day he died, he did not stop trying to work on his polio, to walk again. Some historians said this guy was either mad or he was the most persistent guy in the world. Some people won't give up. Have you noticed in your life these people? And why do you think some people don't give up and other people say, just forget it?
Well, I think there's lots of stories, and I think we've seen some of them, where people have been told, you'll never walk again.
Yeah.
And you used the word persistence. They had hope, they believed that they could walk again. I don't know that they didn't pray about it, but they worked on it, and I believe it was divine healing that caused these things. There's numbers of cases in the medical records where people have, in effect, been healed with no medical explanation. I mean, I believe in the case of my bride alone, the fact that she has hands like you and I, after having been seriously burned, is a miracle. I believe she's a miracle.
Right, and there are those cases, you know, and as you're saying this to me, Randy, I'm thinking of cemeteries with all of the gravestones and all of the paraplegics who have died. I think there's a lot of them who, well, not a lot, but a few people who said, I will not give up. I am going to walk again, and it never happens. You know, a fractured spinal cord, it's over. You're not going to walk again.
But look, that's true, okay, but I will tell you that God created this body that you have and the one I have and others, and it's an amazing thing, and it has amazing healing powers built in. That's all part of him. I mean, I had back surgery and I had serious issues post-surgery, and my right foot was numb. It came alive. And 46 years later, another portion of it came alive after surgery. There's regenerative powers here that God built in.
Right. When I pray with people, with faith, what faith does, knowing that God is with you, is it brings a sense of calmness and a sense of peace that can roll through your body, which I believe, now, that your cells respond to that. I've heard it from the New England Medical Journal that faith moves people to heal quicker. Prayer moves people to heal quicker. I think that there are limits to this. I don't know of anybody who's got out of stage 4 cancer.
Oh, well, I think there are cases that have.
There are, well, and maybe there are. I haven't read them, and I haven't searched for them. And that something happened that was weird. This should not happen. The body, the cells responded this way, and something changed. But I want to go back to we're getting down to the wire here. The issue being, do you want to get better? What kind of a question is that? I think, again, that the issue of that we know life the way it is, and we've learned to get comfortable with the way life is. I'll use your term again, comfort zone. We will take comfort zones sometimes over a better life.
That's because we're familiar with it, we know what's involved, and if I have more, in some cases, if I have more capability, because I'm healed, if you will, more will be expected of me, and maybe I don't want that. I don't know.
The more law and pressure on your life. I mean, yeah, you can have that, but the other part of it is a lot is loosened up, that the fact that this guy can now get up and get some food somewhere, or he can, whatever he couldn't do before, now he's gonna be able to do it.
Well, he's gonna have to fend for himself.
Well, yeah, but do you get comfortable with my identity is in being the sick person of the family, the invalid, what are some of these things that people had there that the blind, the lame, that's my identity in that, which it kind of seem a little ridiculous that someone would not want to open up their eyes, but oftentimes people will go back to what they've always known before. And I think it's one of the great mysteries of human life is sometimes we believe our best life was behind us. And we just want to go back and live the good old days. Well, the good old days weren't the good old days.
Look, when I was a politician, I used to have people tell me that they would like to go back 20 or 30 years into the way it was. Well, you never go back, you got to go forward.
Well, right, you can't go back for one, and I think you've said that before, a long time ago to me. You told me, the only thing you can never get back in your life is time.
That's right, that's right.
People can try to reproduce the past, but that familiarity of life, God does want to take us to better places. I think if saying no to God, I would be in the oddball place of saying, that's good, okay? You don't want it, you don't want it. Then you've decided, no, I don't want a better life. I want the life I know I've always had before.
But things are going to happen in spite of you, okay? I mean, look in our modern world. You see it more easily. It was always there. But we learn, society, individuals learn certain things, and they're more capable than they were before. Even with just technology. You're using a tablet computer right now so that you have your notes in front of you. You have the Bible in front of you, actually. And that you couldn't do 30 years ago.
No, right, and some people will squawk and say, we want to go back to the way it was before tablets, and what's going to happen with AI and all these things. We want to go back to the way it was when men were men and boys were boys. Hey, mister, we can use a man like her, if you know the old song. But the issue of life is, I think you nail it, Randy, we can't go back in time. We can maybe try to live in the past. I think if you go down to San Francisco here, there's probably still some people at A-Berry with tie-dye shirts on. They want to live an era that's gone. But the world moves on.
I don't use a rotary phone anymore. I use this.
No, I don't want to use a rotary phone anymore.
Okay, but so life changes, and you're expected to deal with these changes. And when we get healed, whatever the healing may be, it may be spiritual, it may be emotional, it may be physical.
Say
What-
financially. Can you be healed financially?
Uh,
I can't pay my
you know,
mortgage.
I might say I believe in miracles, that's a big one.
Okay.
But look,
All right.
it's absolutely essential that we learn to live with the opportunity, if you will, that's given to us in all these things. And healing offers new opportunity.
And it does. And I just want to say that, yes, God does want to change our life. God does want to bring us healing in our life. God does want to bring us to better places. And God, I think, does say, do you want to be healed? I use the term here, you want to get better. And sometimes, no, we don't. We want to stay the same. But what God wants to do is he wants to be with us. He wants to bring us his grace. He wants to be a part of our lives. And he wants to take us to places that maybe we've never known before, to the unknown, to the unfamiliar, out of our comfort zone. He will grow us. He will change us. Even with great blessings like these healings, it moves us to another place. So I want to encourage you, look to Jesus. Go after these stories in your life. Ask yourself questions, and ask yourself, I would say, do you want to get better? Sometimes I go, but yeah, good, challenge. I hope you come back and see us again. God's peace and blessings be with you. Randy and I appreciate you being here, getting
Amen.
in on the conversation. And again, come and see us again. Take care now.